All right. Well, welcome everyone to our first virtual Junior Ranger event today. We're going to start out with a wonderful presentation from John Muir Laws, who is a naturalist and an expert nature journaler. He does beautiful drawings, and we're going to learn all about nature journaling and why that is a cool thing to do when you're out in our parks and in our open spaces. So I'm going to turn it over to John now, and he's going to take it away.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to the virtual park here. I'm really excited to be with all of you junior rangers and junior naturalists. I also got started with my excitement and connection with nature and having adventures outdoors at a very, very young age. And doing so with the help of some of rangers and naturalists, they have always inspired me. These are people who really know the parks, really know the forests. And you can, when you learn some of the tricks, both of like where they look for animals, how they observe, and the love and care that they take for parks and open spaces. It's a really wonderful role model of how to be in the forest, and we can learn a lot from them. So great respect and thanks to all our community of ranger naturalists out there. Today, what I want to do is to show you what I think is the #1 tool you can use to think like a naturalist ranger. And that is keeping a notebook of all the observations you make as you explore in the parks. If you walk out into the parks, and you can have a great day climbing over stumps, logs, trees, and you can have a lot of fun. And I recommend having fun every time you're in the forest. But what's going to happen is your ability to remember the details of things that you see. Our memories are not as good as we would wish, as we would like them to be. Instead of just walking through the forest and observing and then forgetting, if you keep a record of your discoveries, the mysteries that you find in a notebook, you're going to find that the next time you go back into that park, you remember all the secrets from last time, and the time after that, and the time after that. Keeping a notebook like this is the best thing you can do to really crystallize your memory. And it's also going to help you notice things that everybody else misses. If you've ever been on a naturalist hike with one of the rangers, you'll be walking down the trail with them, and it's like they've got magic eyes, that they're seeing this here, this here, this here, this here, this here. They're finding all of these treasures along the trail. And other people could walk down that trail and they're not seeing that stuff. How is it that the naturalist gets those magic eyes? The way is that they've trained themselves over years to practice observation, Yeah, you actually have to practice observation. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. So I'm going to show you how to practice observation with a journal. And what you're going to find is that then you walk down the same trails and you are finding the treasures. You're seeing like, oh, whoa, check this out. And everybody else would have walked right past whatever it is that you discovered. But you're going to learn how can you see those special treasures that are in the forest that are hidden in plain sight. I'm going to go over to a document camera and I'm going to open up some of my journals, and I'll kind of walk you through what I am doing and then how I go about this. And I'm going to show you some basic tools that you can put together so that you can do this too. As this presentation goes on, if you have any questions, what I'm going to suggest you do, if you look down on the bottom of your screen, somewhere in the middle, there's a little button with a balloon on it that says chat. If you click on that, a little window pops up, and you can type into there a question that you have for me or for Ranger Catherine. And so type your questions into there. And then what we'll be doing is we will be going through those and answering some of your questions at the end of this little presentation. So any question you have, and we'll get to those. You ready? Let's go take a look at this document camera. Here we go. Camera, go. All right, so this is one of my notebooks. And what I want to do is just do kind of an initial quick page flip through this book, and you'll see the sorts of things that I'm seeing and discovering and recording. And then we'll look in sort of, how you can go about doing that same thing. So the first thing that you might notice is that I am using pictures and I'm putting in words together. So on any of these pages, you open it up, you're going to see things recorded with pictures and drawings. You're going to see other things written in. The way your brain works when you're drawing pictures is different than the way your brain works when you are writing words. And some things are easier to show with a picture. Some things are easier to show with with some words. And if you're using those both together, your brain's going to be noticing more. Now, you don't need to be an artist in order to do this, but the more that you do this and the more that you practice it, what you're going to find is that your ability to draw what you see gets better and better and better and better with every page you do. So the more you do, if you aren't comfortable drawing at the start, just start making a few little diagrams and sketches. The more you do that, the better and better those skills are going to get. And the same is true with writing. So I am dyslexic. I have a learning difference. And for me, spelling is really, really challenging. But I use writing anyway all over my journal. And if you look at a lot of my journal pages, if anybody gets in there and starts looking at my spelling, you'll discover tons of spelling mistakes. But if I just say to myself, like, oh no, I can't use words because then I'll spell it wrong, then I'm really limiting myself from a very important strategy for documenting and recording what I see. So I've got words and I've got pictures, and I play with those both together. And let's just take a look at now some of the content that I have in this book. So here, it's a drawing of a bird. So I'm recording observations that I'm seeing about this bird. How does this bird look? So sometimes my notes are just, documenting how does this bird look? But I also am interested in the things that it does, the behaviors of things. So this bird is sitting on a branch. It's this cool bird called a trogon. And it's going ear, 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 ear. So you see what I'm doing? I'm writing ear, ear, ear. So my words are going up and down because the sound goes ear, 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 ear. And so I can describe the voices of the birds. With practice, I'm getting to the point that I can walk through the forest and I can identify all the different kinds of birds that I'm seeing just by the sounds that they make. And you can do the same thing. And look over here. Here I'm discovering the behavior of birds. So here are these two birds, and they are, maybe I've got a picture of one of these guys. Yeah, this cool dude right here. Look at this. It's got this crazy crest. So the first time I see this, I'm making a sketch more of the bird. Here it is with this crazy crest that it can stick up. It's got yellow on the wings and one yellow under the table there. What a neat looking bird. But here I'm finding a couple of them together. And this one is doing a wing flutter display to this one. So it's walking up to the other one. It's going with its wings. Oh, that's really cool. And then one of these birds, there's a different kind of a bird right over here. Different species. This one has a yellow belly. And one of these guys comes up and it starts bugging this other bird going cha 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 cha. All right, so I am describing the behaviors of all these different birds. So that's a lot of fun to do, not just what something is, but what does it do? When I'm making sketches and drawings, you'll often see that I won't just draw one picture.
And so here I've got several drawings. This one just of the head. Here's the back of the head. Here's the back of the head, side view, So what's happening here is that when the bird first pops up in front of me, I start making one sketch. And then the bird moves. And when the bird moves, what I do is I just start a new sketch right next to that first one of same bird, different pose. Same bird, different pose. And then it flies into the shade and I can't really see the colors. Okay, so then I start working on a little sketch like that. Then it flies out to a place where I can see it better. I continue working on something like this. So what I do is I'm bouncing around to these different drawings. I don't have to finish any of them. Here's a picture of this cool raccoon relative. And you notice none of these pictures are finished. This one's a little bit more finished than the others. I only saw it for a little brief while. And but look at this sketch. There it is walking away from me and it's raising its tail up. So it walks around with its tail up. I mean, that's just a ball with a little line coming up. I don't have to finish any of these drawings. But every drawing that I get in here, every note that I make is my brain recording information and noticing more about what I see. So drawings can be close-ups. They can be far away views. So these were little parrots that were all kind of hanging like grapes on a string. So there's a little drawing of those behaviors. That's a really fun way to approach things in your journal. Anything that I find, this is near my home in San Mateo. These were two moths that were attached together mating who were hanging on a little basket outside my front door. And so here's a little drawing of me, my two daughters. We're drawing and sketching the little moths that are out there in the middle of the night wearing our pajamas. And here are the moths themselves. And look at how different they look. If I just saw one of these, I would probably think that that's one kind of a moth and this is the other kind of a moth. But I see them together and I go, oh, wow, those are the same kinds of moths. Let's take a look at a few kinds of strategies that I'm also keeping in my journal that help me record more information. So if I move or tap this thing lightly, it opens its wings a little bit and I can see the underside of its other wing poking out here. And look at that. It has this crazy eye spot. Whoa, check this out. Like a little eyeball drawing on its wing. And I've been told that sometimes when these are sitting there and a bird finds them, they open their wing and all of a sudden the bird thinks, oh my gosh, there's a huge critter with big eyes staring at me, and they get scared away. I've never seen that happen. That's what people have explained that to me as before. But I think that's an interesting explanation for that little feature on its body. Isn't that cool? And look here. Here's a close-up of the shape of the antenna. At this scale, I couldn't draw in all the details of how the antenna is shaped, but it had this very odd shape to it. So I drew a close-up of what that looks like. So in your journals, you can put in details of things that you think are interesting. You can put in close-ups, and you don't even have to draw the whole thing. To save time, what I did out here is I drew this little critter, and I didn't draw in the details on that wing. See if you can figure out why. Why is it that I only drew one wing on this one and this one? I've got a little shape in. It says that the wing goes there. Can you see my nature journaling strategy? Right? It's getting late. I don't have all the time in the world. So what I did is I just focused on one side because that side over here is going to be the same pattern. So that's a great way of saving time when I'm drawing a butterfly or something like that. I'll often just focus on one side. And then when the butterfly flies away or the moth flies away, I can draw the one on the other side later, or I can just make a note to myself that the wings had the same patterns on them. There's no one way to do journaling. There's no kind of right thing that you should be doing, but anything that to you looks interesting, just start recording your information about that. let's take a look at another strategy that you can use in your own notebook and journal. Counting things, measuring things, recording numbers is really, really useful to add into your journals. So I noticed that there are a bunch of bees, bumblebees, around a ceanothus plant. So here's a picture of the big shrub. It's a big shrub. That's me standing next to it. Right? This is a detail of the of some of the leaves and the flowers. So that goes in there. Let's zoom in more on the little bumblebee, shall we? So when we zoom in more on the bumblebee, I notice that its back legs have these big yellow balls on them. And that is a collection of pollen that the bee has made from this flower. So here's a little ball that I drew on here saying, here's the actual size of a full pollen sac. And then I started to see that actually there's a bunch of them that are different sizes. So I started counting things. And I counted like how many are orange, how many are yellow. And here's the little chart that I made. So most of them are this deep yellow color. Some of them had no pollen sacs that hadn't collected pollen at all. But isn't that interesting? Most of them were yellow. I'm guessing that the pollen from this plant, the ceanothus, is yellow. But I'm also wondering, these ones that had orange pollen, where did that come from? And that leads me to another thing that you can do in your journals, which is where you have a question, I write those questions down in my journal. And what you can see here is my thinking process. So I'm thinking, what causes the color change? I do a little, sometimes when I write the word change, I draw a little triangle. It's a little, what causes the color change in the pollen? So is that from different sources? Is that something that they've changed the mixture of it? Like this might be mixed with more, maybe it's using sort of bee spit to kind of help hold that pollen on, right? Is it older pollen? Is it that some bees like collecting yellow pollen and others collect yellow, orange, and that's just sort of a preference thing? I don't know, but here I am on my journal page writing out some possible explanations. So I'm looking for mysteries, and then I am coming up with possible explanations. This is a great way to start exploring things in your world. Let me show you a few other nature journaling strategies. And again, I want to encourage everybody to, I see Kyra has put in a question into the chat box, and I'll be able to answer that and others in a moment. And want to encourage you folks, as you have questions, just like Kyra has done, to drop those questions into the chat box, and I'll be answering those live in just a moment. If you like comics and graphic novels, you can make your own about the discoveries that you make in nature. So anytime I see a cool nature event, I can put it in my journal, and that's going to help me remember it, and it's going to help me pay attention. So here I am out at the Palo Alto Baylands, and here is this baby bird. It's a kind of a bird called a black-necked stilt. And this baby one, it's got really long legs, super cute, really fuzzy. It's running around near its mom and dad. And then I spot the gopher snake. So here comes the gopher snake, and it starts slithering. It's this huge gopher snake. So at least 5 feet long. That is a lot of snake. Could a snake like that eat a bird like this? Oh, you bet it could. Absolutely. So that's a real threat. And so this snake starts approaching the baby bird. And then the parents fly in and they land here between the gopher snake and the baby. The baby gets down into sort of low plants, and the parents, kip, 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 kip. They're strutting around in front of it. But the gopher snake, it keeps getting closer to the baby. What's going to happen? Well, glad you asked. Here's what the parents do then. The male, I can tell the difference between males and females by subtle color differences in them. It gets up right in front of the snake, this far away from the snake, right in front of the snake, and it opens its wings and is dancing around with its wings open right in front of it. And it kip, 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 kip. It's dancing, it's waving its wings. And then the snake goes like, I don't know what's going on with this. And the snake swims away. So it gets back in the water and it swims away. Cool to watch a snake swim. And then over back on the shore, the little stilt family just goes walking off together with a baby right between mama and papa. I mean, look at over here how far away they were from each other. But once the danger is gone, they just stick together as a little family. I mean, that was really cool. So I would forget the details of this if I didn't make my own little comic. So you can do the same thing too. When you make these little nature discoveries, you can create your own little comic of what you see. And to make that possible, you need to put together your own little naturalist notebook adventure kit. Let's take a look at a few of the things that I carry with me and what you might want to do. So the first is going to be some form of a journal, right? And the size journal really depends on you. I recommend bringing a journal that is the largest size that you would really, honestly, realistically, regularly bring with you on your hikes and adventures. If you have a great big journal, but you don't bring it with you, it's not going to work because you don't have it with you. But on the other hand, one that is too small, you'll only be able to get a few of your notes and ideas down on paper. You're not going to be able to think as actively on the paper. If you just have one of those little mini books, you get half an idea on it, and then you have to turn the page, and half an idea on that, and then you have to turn the page. Oh, here's a fun example of a misspelling. I was drawing these nasturtiums, all this time carrying with these nasturtiums. And I thought, I'm going to make a title. So I wrote nasturtium on the top. And anybody who spells better than I do would quickly figure out, somebody pointed out like, Jack, nice title. You might have missed 2 letters in that word. So again, I recommend don't get wrapped around the axle about like, oh no, I'm going to make a spelling mistake. When you make a spelling mistake, that's great. That's fine. The journal is a perfectly safe place for you to do that. Similarly, you don't have to worry about making pretty pictures. The more that you draw, the better and better and better your pictures are going to become. So the more that you do this, the better you're going to get at drawing what you see. So journal is tool number 1. The second thing that you're going to need is something to journal with. And a couple of ways you can do this. You can bring a pencil with you. Pencils are we all know how to use them. The nice thing about a pencil is you can erase it. The bad thing about a pencil is that they tend to smear and smudge a lot. So if you find your drawings are really smudging and smearing, then you might find it's easier to draw with a pen. And the advantage of a pen is that it's not going to smudge. The disadvantage of a pen is that you put a mark down on the page and then you decide later, I don't really want that mark to be there. Well, you're stuck with it. There are erasable ballpoint pens, which work really well. So you might consider one of those. But it's nice to have something that doesn't, look at this. I go like that on my page, I'm not smearing it. So these were drawn with a ballpoint pen. And so the nice thing about that is that they don't smear. Another thing that you're going to find is that it is really fun to put in color. And Cairo was asking about this, like, what am I using here for my color? I'm going to show you notes in a couple of books. So here's a different journal. So here is this crazy sweet potato that is sprouted in my pantry. And so I was making some observations about that. Might be easier to see what medium I'm using here. This is watercolor. That's a watercolor drawing. Watercolor at the start, when you're starting journaling, most of the things in these books are watercolor. But watercolor can be a lot more frustrating right at the start, because when you're first using how to use watercolor, you get all these sort of puddles where you don't want them. And then you're thinking, like, would my journal please dry out, right? I want this to dry, but there's these puddles of water on your page. You can learn to control watercolor and things to do to make it dry much more quickly. That makes it useful to use in the field. But at the start, what I recommend that people do is, let's see if I've got, there's some with colored pencil. Doing drawings with colored pencil is so much of an easier way to start. And what I suggest you do is, rather than having a giant kit of colored pencils, you put together a small set of colored pencils that you can easily bring with you. If you have too many, you're going to go like, oh, it's a nuisance to bring that stuff with me. I don't want to do it today. So I've just got a small set of colored pencils, and you can go really, really far with those tools. So I'm going to show you a colored pencil drawing trick that I think you're going to find helps you be able to do stuff with colored pencils. Here's the reason why I can get away with a small set of pencils. Let's say something is green, and I'm drawing some object and it's green, right? And I want to get that color of green. Here's what I find happens. I'll test pencil number 1 and say, is that the right color of green? And I go, no, that's this sort of bright green sort of a thing. That's not my cucumber green. Well, I've got another green pencil over here. Let's try that. Even worse. Ruh-roh. Maybe I don't have all the right pencils that I need. What about this one? A little bit too olivey. That's not right either. And I'm out of greens. What do I do? Well, some people say just get more pencils. But I say what you can do is, with your, oh, look, there's one more green. One more green. This little one right here. That's going to work. That's going to work. Will it? Let's find out. No, much too yellowy green. I want a darker green. I want a darker green. And how can I get that? Well, let me show you this, the best trick for working with colored pencils. I want a darker green. I'm going to take one of my dark pencils. I've got a dark purple here. I've got a dark blue. I've got a dark brown. Yeah, that ought to do it. And I'm going to take which of these greens is the closest to it. Was it this one? Yeah. So what I can do is, when you're working with colored pencils, if you start lightly, I'm going to put in some light here. I'm not pressing hard. I'm not going, because when I go press hard, I flatten my paper out. And then I can't add more pencil to it. But if I start with something like that, I can now, here's some blue. I'm going to now put this color on top of it. And it mixes it into it because I didn't press too hard initially. All right. Now that is, got a little bit of that in there. What about this? Oh, a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of this in there too. It's going to make it a little bit duller green. And then I'm going to mix some of this back into it. I'm going to try, just to make the whole thing darker, a little bit of this purple in here, and then push back with a little bit more green. You see how I'm able to add color on top of color on top of color? And that allows me to get a much more interesting range of colors with just a small set of pencils. So if none of these is an exact hit, I can take one color and I can modify it by putting more pencils together. Just to do, one more little drawing demo. If I take one color of pencil, I'm going to actually show you another little strategy here. When I'm layering pencils together, this one, notice my pencil is going this way. As I start to put on this other pencil here, actually, let me use this one instead. Yeah, that'll work. I'm going to make my pencil strokes in a different direction. Let's zoom down more on that. You can build up all sorts of colors with a small set of pencils. And the more you practice it, the better you'll get at it. The big secret in this is not to press hard right at the start. Because once you do that, it's hard to get other kinds of pencil into that because you've already just completely smashed out the paper. When you get towards the end, if you want to, I now can come back in, press a little bit more forcefully, and then I get more vibrant colors in there, but those blues are still showing through. That's a really great way to get more color into your paper. Right. If you are choosing to do watercolor, I'll show you my trick for doing this in nature, because you don't want a whole bunch of messy supplies out there. This is an old sock, and I cut off the toe of it, and I can put that around my wrist. I've got an old sock, and this is a brush pen. This is a paintbrush that has the water in the handle. So right now, it's just water in there. Let's zoom in a little bit more. Whoop. Now look at this. All I need to do, let's have a little drawing of a bird. Often when I'm drawing a bird, I start off initially just making a light shape that gets my basic form in there. And I can make sure that, yeah, that's the form I want for this bird, and it's going to have a wing in here. If you're interested in learning more about drawing specific things like how do you draw a squirrel, how do you, person is asking, why am I using different directions? So let me just jump back to that, and then I'll jump back to this bird. So the reason I start off in one direction, when I start off in this direction, what happens is I am pushing, I'm kind of flattening things down in this direction. But if I then come across it, if I go across in this same direction, imagine that you were combing hair. You've pushed all the hairs in this direction, right? But if I now come across a different way, then because I'm going in a different direction, there will be more texture in the paper to pick up my pencil strokes in the second direction. So that's why I do that little direction switch. So great question from Melanie. Thank you, Melanie. I'm going to draw this bird in with a little bit of my ballpoint pen here. I like often doing a ballpoint pen because it allows me to draw a light line and a heavy line. So there's my bird's head. And on my website is johnmuirlaws.com. I have hundreds of nature drawing tutorials and videos where I walk you through my process of how do you, what are you doing? How do you draw birds? How do you draw mammals? How do you draw squirrels? Different subjects. And I'm using a lot of those techniques here, but in this short workshop that we have together, I don't really have time to kind of go through all the details of how I do that, but I want to let you folks know that it's a safe website filled with lots of resources and materials that you can use anytime you want. It's kind of cool. Birds' tails, they sometimes hold them in line with their bodies, but sometimes when the bird is feeling kind of frisky, they will take their tail and they'll pump it out like that. I'm going to draw this bird with its tail in that kind of like woo position. Here it is. And there's a clump of feathers underneath here called the undertail coverts. This is where the legs come down. They have a little sock like that comes down, and then their leg comes forward. And this one is going to be hopping on the ground. So I'm going to draw the sort of side view of the feet. And to make this into a scrub jay, I'm going to give it a little bit of a bigger beak. So I'm actually thinking of a particular kind of bird that visits my garden and visits lots of parks around San Mateo. All right. There we go. So I just want to do a little demonstration of how I might go about. Actually, I want this belly to be a little bit more fluffy. See that? I made a mistake. I had a line down here. Now I want it down here. That's okay. Just like my spelling, there are going to be mistakes in my drawings. And what I do is I just let them stay there. And if I get really just like, oh no, I can't make a mistake, then it makes it hard to make any drawings. You want to get better at drawing, make lots and lots of drawings. And don't worry about having to make anything perfect. The more you do, the better you're going to get. Now, let me show you how this cool brush works. What I do, I'm going to zoom back so that you can see me mix the paints also. Back. There's my bird. There's my brush. There's my palette. What I do is I just take this brush with the water in the handle and I rub it on my paints. And it is now water from the brush is gone down into here. And look at that. I have paint on my brush. Ooh, okay, that's cool. So I'm going to put in the shadows on my little bird first. And I don't want them, I often will test my colors before they get down here onto the bird. I'm going to get rid of a little bit of my paint on my sock. That's a little bit better. And now I'm painting some shadows on this bird down here, some on its belly, some underneath the wing. Put a little bit of a shadow here underneath its chest. And on the underside of the tail here, I'll get some shadows down there. So I like putting in my shadows first. There's no distraction of anything else. Let's zoom down. Once my shadows are in, notice that there's no big puddles of water here. No big puddles of water. And that's something that's nice about the way these brushes work. If it starts to get too wet, I just give it a wipe on my sock. And I don't end up with big drips of water at the tip of my brush. Those big puddles make it really difficult to work with watercolor. But now I want to go on to a different color. And look, I've got all this color here in the tip of my brush. So what do? Give my brush a little squeeze and a wipe on my sock. All right. Now look at this, clean brush. Just like that. So my brush cleaned itself from the inside out. The squeezing water through there took all the paint there, pushed it onto the sock. Clean brush. Now, this J has some brownish on the middle of its back. So I test to make sure that that color is right, and that's close enough. And I'm just gonna go right here. And then I put that down. I think, oh no, that's too dark. A little bit too dark, a little bit too brown. So I clean my brush, and while it's still wet, I take a clean brush. I'm going to come in there and I'm going to lift out some of that paint. So swipe across here, wipe, swipe and wipe, swipe and wipe. Look at that. I just made the back lighter. Don't want to do it too many times or I start to kind of make my paper all gunky. I'm just going to let that dry now, but I lightened that up. It's now a color and a value that I like. Now, the scrub jay has these beautiful blue feathers. And so I am going to mix some blue, test my color on the side. That's a little bit too intense dark. I go for something that is, I like that better. Not quite as purpley. Right. And I'm going to put it above the forehead. You see how this thing comes to a nice little sharp point. That allows me to, it's almost like I'm just coloring in with a pencil instead of a big floppy brush. If you've got a big blunt tipped, most of those watercolor brushes that come in the basic watercolor sets, and they've got that flat tip instead of a pointed tip, you wonder, how is it that other people can get, all sorts of color and detail into a watercolor drawing? And why can't I do that? The reason is, it's not you. It's that with a brush like that, nobody can really draw well. So you get yourself a brush that comes to a sharp tip, and it's just like drawing. It's just like coloring in. So I can just take this very, very precisely and put the color right where I want it. And I want some blue on the tail. This bird also has, I'm now going to wipe and wash. So if you've been frustrated by drawing with coloring with watercolor, because you just can't control it, you just get these big puddles of gunk, I might suggest changing up your brush. And you might find that the whole business becomes a lot easier. Scrub jays have this little dark mask and a dark beak, dark legs. That allows me to have a lot more control. A lot more control. As I do that. Let's put some in the back. There's a little scrub jay hopping around on my lawn. I want to remind folks, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop those into the chat, and we will be able to answer those live. So we're accepting. The question is, with the water brush, what size is it? So there are several different sizes of water brushes and several different brands of water brush. Of all the ones that are out there, I strongly prefer the brushes that are made by Pentel. So this is a Pentel Aquash water brush, and they come in 3 sizes. The only one that I use is the large size water brush. And the reason for that is that with the large size water brush, if I want to cover a large area with color, I can do that really, really easily. So I'm going to take my brush, get a bunch of paint in here, and I want an area to be filled with color. I can do that quickly and easily. And if you've got the little one, just the little brush, you can't really do, you have to go back to the pan way too often. But with this, with one sort of, you can actually work a large area really, really quickly and easily. And it also, when I want it to, in addition to being a big cover area brush, as long as I don't have a big drip of water at the tip of it, I can get a very, very sharp tip. So look at this. This is, you'd think that you can only do something like this with a pencil. But look at this. Here are fine lines that I'm drawing. And you can use this just like drawing. But you're using a paintbrush. So that's why I like this. I'll show you one other trick that this little brush does. This is super fun. Let's say I want to have a little bit of texture on something, like to make my squirrel fuzzy. If I take the tip of this and I fan it out with my fingers, look at that. Now check this out. Zoom in on that. Is that cool? If I make those strokes in just a few different directions, I get this sort of sense of fuzzy texture. Takes a little bit of playing with, a little bit of getting used to, but that with your sock, you can actually make watercolor be something that is useful for you when you're out in the field. And that's a lot of fun. Let's jump back to some of those journals and take a look at some other strategies of things that you can put in your nature notebook. Because I know that when I look through other people's sketchbooks, I'll go like, oh, you can do that? Yeah, I guess you can. That's really cool. It's really fun to look through other people's notebooks. So another thing that you can do is little landscape drawings. If you're drawing a scene in one of the San Mateo parks that you're visiting, I find if you drew a really big landscape, they take a lot of time to do and they're hard to do. But when you make your drawings, your landscape drawings, a little bit smaller, you can complete those really quickly. I mean, look at the size of my hand next to this landscape drawing. Right? That is a small landscape drawing. But you get a lot of information just in that little space. So try mini landscapes, and those are a ton of fun. And if you want to do something a little bit bigger, you can. But if I had done this and tried to take up the whole page, I would be working at that for a long time. So you can think of these just like a little snapshot. You can take just a little, like, oh, let's just get a little portrait of that place. Another thing to think about in your nature journals is what sort of details to put in. If you look here, this elk has no eye. The reason that this elk has no eye is that because when I was here looking at this elk, I couldn't see its eye. I couldn't see its eye. From that distance, the angle, I couldn't see the eye. Now, I know that this elk has an eye, and I could go make it up and stick it in there. But my general recommendation is that if you don't see it, don't draw it. So if this angle, this way, I can't see where its eye is, just leave it out. And it looks just fine. It looks like what you would see from a critter from this distance. But if I get in there and I'm putting in all these things that I think should be there, that can really mess me up. Because then I start having to make things up. And so not just big things, landscapes and elk, but also consider small things. So this was a study of a caterpillar that I found outside my my front door. This cool little caterpillar. And so I've got drawings of it. These can be quick drawings. And so here it was at the start. And then, so it started to turn brown and shrivel a little bit on this end. Like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And here's what happened, is that the skin all shriveled up into a little ball and fell off, leaving this behind. And then here's an enlargement of it. What we've got is the pupa of this thing. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to get to see what kind of moth comes out of this. Isn't that fun? And I waited, and I waited, and I waited for my moth. And then one day I noticed that lying next to it was this little thing. Check this out. This is just a fun little mystery. This was lying next to this. And there also was a little hole in the side of that pupa. It turned black. What's going on? This is the pupa of a fly that laid its eggs on the original caterpillar. And I looked over the skin and I found these little white dots on it that may have been these things. There were 2 little white dots on the outside, and I think that those are the eggs, and they burrowed in. And there were 2 of these little pupa things inside one of these. 2 of those inside this, and the rest of this was all dead and dried out. So this little critter cruising along, having a nice day, minding its own business. All right. The eggs get dropped on it. It pupates, but those guys are now inside it. Ruh-roh. Those develop inside of it. And on a subsequent journal, I have the details of the fly that came out of it. I mean, what a crazy adventure. But what you can do in your journal is you can document all these little discoveries and things that you find. So now I know when I find a caterpillar like this, I know to get out my magnifying glass. Let's see if I can find any little eggs that are on it. If so, I may hatch a fly instead of a moth. Isn't that cool? I mean, it's just so much fun to make these little discoveries and investigations from nature. So that is a little bit of a look into the world of nature journaling. Now let me bop back into this view. Here we go. Hi. So what I really recommend that you do is you want to train yourself to kind of see with naturalist eyes. You want to be a junior ranger. You want to start thinking and training yourself to see like a ranger. And the best way to do that is to get your own notebook and just start documenting the observations that you make. Another really important part of that is when you make some observations on the page, write where you are and when it is. So the date and your location. So when you do that, the notes that you take go from just being, here's a picture of a caterpillar, to data about a specific thing that is in a specific park at a specific time. That allows us to bring this real interesting element of science to our journals. I'm just going to take see, we've got time for a couple other little questions here. And the question is about the life cycles of these caterpillars. It is so much fun to look for caterpillars on your own, find out what they're munching on, put them in a little jar, draw them, and wait. And you can figure out all these things yourself. I've had wasps, little tiny wasps that can't really sting me, hatching out of caterpillars, parasitic wasps. You're like, whoa, I did not see that. I did not see that coming. It was supposed to be a butterfly. It's a little iridescent blue metallic robot wasp, right? So you can follow all those life histories and put those pieces together yourself. It's really, really fun to do. And for the more you do this, the faster you're going to get at it. It's going to get faster and faster and faster. You don't have to worry about completing any of these pictures. The more you do it, the better it gets. So for me, drawing a typical picture of a bird, it'll take maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And on my website, I've got lots of tools and techniques. I've got videos on speed drawing birds and those sort of things, and you can go there and check those out. And there's no particular book that you need any particular journal. I kind of think it's fun to have some journals with toned paper on them. You saw that some of the journals I was demonstrating there, they were kind of gray toned paper. And you can use those because then I can, put a white pencil on top of it and things kind of pop out. But the best journal is the one that you have with you, right? So don't think like I got to go get some toned paper journal. So because he demonstrated and so I can't do that yet. No, look around the house. There probably is a little notebook that you can now take and devote to your nature exploration journal. And then when you go out with family, bring this with you. And the more that you do that, the better it's going to get. I got started with nature journaling because I was and still am a really curious kid. And I discovered that nature journaling opened all these doors for me to discover and to learn from my own adventures. And when I started doing that, I realized that I can solve all these little mysteries through my own direct observations. And it's trained me to see like a ranger. And so I want to thank all of you junior rangers for joining us today. Start to get your junior ranger kit together. And when you and family go out exploring, bring it along with you. Just sit down and do a few little observations each little trip. And you'll find that those times when you're making those observations, that's when you are going to remember the most. So when you find something really cool, you're like, I got to remember this. Stop down, bust out that journal. And your learning, your memory is going to go way up, and you're training yourself to see the little clues and mysteries, just like those ranger naturalists do. You walk down the trail with them, they're finding this, they're seeing this, they're seeing this. How do they do that? I was just walking down that trail on my own the other day, and I didn't see any of that stuff. It's because they've trained their eyes to see the things that most of us just walk by. And you can do the same thing too and become a nature detective. So Junior Rangers, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you had a really good time. I'm going to now turn us back to joining back up with Ranger Catherine, and who's going to pull us out. Oh,
hi everyone. I might look a little different. We're getting ready for a fun reading with the Ranger today, talking about fall. And so if you join us on Facebook Live next in a couple minutes, then you'll learn all about why I'm dressed like a deer. So thank you so much, John Muir Laws, for this wonderful session, teaching us all about nature journaling and the fun aspects of exploring nature and how you can record it to learn more later and remember it for the next time that you come out to one of our parks. So thank you so much again. If you would do us the honor of giving us your feedback, that would be great, because we are hoping to do a junior ranger session like this once a month. And next month, we are having a wonderful visit from Corky Quirk, who is coming from NorCal Bats to teach us all about Northern California bats and their biology, and she's going to show us some live bats on camera too. So I hope you can join us there. Please visit johnmuirlaws.com to find out more information about John Muir Laws and his wonderful artwork and some tutorials to learn more about how to draw different types of creatures. So thank you all for joining us today. I hope to see you again next month. Bye, everyone.